The English Couch. Hey, English learners, welcome back to the English Couch, your cozy corner for real English conversations. I'm Mia.
And I'm Leo. We're so glad you found your way to the couch today.
Today, we're diving into something that feels almost paradoxical, something many of you experience but rarely talk about openly. You understand English. You can follow podcasts, read articles, maybe even enjoy movies without subtitles. And yet, when it's your turn to speak, something freezes.
Oh, that silence. That awkward pause. That moment where your brain is like, I know this, but your mouth just refuses to cooperate. Honestly, it's one of the most frustrating feelings I've ever experienced.
And here's the deeper conflict. Many of you listening are successful people, or will be. You solve complex problems every day, in your own language. But in English, you suddenly feel smaller, less precise, less powerful.
That's painfully accurate. It's like going from being a confident speaker to a hesitant version of yourself. And it doesn't match who you really are.
Exactly. And that mismatch creates tension. Not just linguistic tension, but emotional tension. You begin to question yourself. Why can I understand so much but say so little? Why does my mind go blank at the worst possible moment?
And then comes the worst part, self-doubt. You start thinking maybe you're just not good at speaking, which, by the way, is not true.
Not true at all. Today, we're going to unpack this struggle, not as a failure, but as a very natural stage of growth. We'll explore what's really happening inside your mind, why this gap exists, and how to start closing it, not by forcing yourself, but by understanding yourself.
So if you've ever thought, I get everything, but I just can't speak, this episode is for you.
Let's gently step into it together. Let's begin with a simple but powerful truth. Understanding a language and speaking it are fundamentally different skills. Understanding is passive, you receive meaning. Speaking is active, you create meaning. And that difference changes everything.
Oh wow, I remember this so clearly. I used to watch English shows every night. Like, I could follow complex plots, jokes, even sarcasm. I felt proud. I thought, okay, I'm basically fluent now. Then one day, I had a meeting with a foreign client, and suddenly, everything collapsed. I wanted to say something simple like, we need more time to finalize the proposal. Easy, right? But in that moment, my brain froze. I started saying, we need more time to finish the proposal. It sounded robotic, broken. And the worst part? I knew the sentence. I had heard it many times before, but I couldn't produce it naturally. That was the moment I realized, understanding doesn't mean speaking.
That's such a powerful realization. Let me give you a metaphor. Imagine your mind as a library. When you understand English, you're walking through this library, reading books. You recognize the words, the sentences, they're familiar. That's passive knowledge. But speaking? Speaking is like writing your own book in real time, without notes, while people are watching.
Oof, that hits hard.
Because when you speak, you're not just recognizing, you're retrieving, organizing, and producing language instantly. It's a completely different cognitive process.
Wait, so it's not that I don't know English, it's that I haven't trained the writing part of my brain?
Exactly. You've been reading a lot, but you haven't practiced writing enough. And speaking is writing, just faster.
That makes so much sense. It's like I built a huge passive vocabulary, but no active muscle.
Yes. And muscles need training, not just exposure.
Honestly, that already makes me feel better. Because it's not a mystery anymore, it's just a missing practice.
And that leads us to something even deeper. Because even when you have the knowledge, something else often stops you. The second reason is subtle, but incredibly powerful: perfectionism. Many learners don't speak not because they can't, but because they don't want to make mistakes.
Oh, that's me. I remember being in a team discussion where everyone was speaking English. I had an idea, actually a really good one. But before I spoke, my brain started checking everything: grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation. And while I was preparing the perfect sentence, someone else said something similar, and I just sat there thinking, I missed my chance. It's funny, I didn't fail because I didn't know English. I failed because I wanted to say it perfectly.
That's such a common experience. Let me describe it this way. Your mind becomes like a strict editor sitting behind you, watching every word you say. Before anything leaves your mouth, the editor asks, is this correct? Is this elegant? Is this impressive? And if the answer isn't perfect, the editor says, no, stay silent.
Wow, that editor is harsh.
Very harsh. And here's the irony. In your native language, that editor is relaxed. You speak freely, even with mistakes. But in English, the editor becomes a perfectionist.
Wait, that's so true. In my native language, I say things wrong all the time, and I don't care.
Exactly. Fluency isn't about perfection, it's about flow. And perfectionism kills flow.
So, the more I try to sound perfect, the less I actually speak?
Yes, because perfection creates hesitation, and hesitation breaks communication.
That's a bit of a painful truth.
But also a freeing one, because it means the solution isn't learn more, it's allow more.
Allow myself to be imperfect.
Exactly.
Okay, but even when I try to relax, sometimes my brain just goes blank, like completely empty.
That brings us to the third point. Speaking requires speed, and your brain simply hasn't built that speed yet.
Yeah, that explains a lot. I remember trying to join a fast-paced conversation at a networking event. People were speaking quickly, joking, interrupting each other, and I was processing everything, slowly. By the time I understood one sentence, they were already on the next topic, and when I finally thought of something to say, the moment was gone. I felt like I was always 2 steps behind.
Let's think of your brain like a road system. When you first learn English, you're building small, narrow roads. Cars, your thoughts, can pass through, but slowly. Understanding is like watching cars pass. You don't need speed, you just observe. But speaking? Speaking means driving the car yourself. And if the roads are narrow, your driving will be slow.
So it's not that my brain is empty, it's just slow traffic.
Exactly. And speed doesn't come from knowledge alone. It comes from repetition. Every time you speak, you widen the road. You make it easier for thoughts to travel faster.
That's interesting, because I always thought I needed more vocabulary before speaking.
Vocabulary helps, but speed comes from use, not storage.
So waiting until I feel ready is actually slowing me down.
Yes, because readiness comes after practice, not before.
That's a bit uncomfortable, but also motivating.
And there's one more layer to this, because sometimes it's not just speed or perfection, it's something deeper. The fourth reason is emotional. When you speak English, you don't feel like yourself.
Oh, this one hits differently. There was a time I had to introduce myself in English at a conference. In my native language, I'm confident, expressive, even a bit funny. But in English, I sounded basic, flat, like a completely different person. I remember thinking, this is not me. And after that, I avoided speaking whenever I could, because it felt like I was showing a weaker version of myself.
That's such an honest reflection. Language is not just a tool, it's part of your identity. It carries your personality, your humor, your intelligence. When you switch to English, you temporarily lose access to that full identity. It's like wearing a suit that doesn't quite fit yet.
Yeah, it feels uncomfortable, like I can't express who I really am.
And that creates resistance. Not just linguistic, but emotional resistance. Because speaking English feels like shrinking.
So I'm not just afraid of mistakes, I'm afraid of being misunderstood as a person.
Exactly. You're protecting your identity.
Wow, I never thought about it like that.
But here's the beautiful part. Over time, English doesn't replace your identity. It expands it. You don't lose yourself. You gain a new version of yourself.
So, it's not about sounding like my native self immediately.
No, it's about slowly growing into a new voice.
That's actually comforting.
And once you accept that, something begins to shift. Because the goal is no longer perfection, it's connection. Here's the fifth reason, and it's one of the biggest hidden obstacles. You're translating in your head instead of thinking directly in English.
Oh, I've been stuck in that loop for years. I remember ordering coffee once. I wanted to say something simple like, Can I get an iced latte with oat milk? But instead of just saying it, my brain went, okay, in my language, now translate. Iced latte, oat milk. Wait, is that correct? And by the time I finished translating, the barista was just staring at me. So I ended up saying something awkward like, I want cold coffee with oat milk. And I walked away thinking, why was that so hard?
Because translation creates delay. Let me explain it with a metaphor. Imagine your thoughts are messages and your brain is a messenger. When you think in your native language, the messenger walks straight to the door and delivers the message. But when you translate, it's like the messenger has to stop at an office, rewrite the message in another language, and then deliver it.
So it's like double work?
Exactly. And in real-time conversation, that extra step creates hesitation, confusion, and sometimes panic.
Wait, so fluent speakers don't translate at all?
Not consciously. They think directly in the language. It becomes automatic.
That sounds far away.
It's closer than you think. It starts small, with simple thoughts. Instead of translating full sentences, you begin to attach meaning directly to English words.
So instead of thinking, I'm thirsty in my language and translating, I just think, I'm thirsty in English.
Exactly. You build a direct connection.
That feels like rewiring my brain.
In a way, it is.
Okay, but sometimes even when I don't translate, I still hesitate, especially around other people.
That hesitation often comes from something deeper. You're performing instead of communicating.
Oh, that explains a lot. There was this moment in a meeting where I had to present a small update. Nothing complicated. But instead of focusing on the message, I started thinking, do I sound professional? Is my grammar correct? Do they think my English is good? And suddenly, I wasn't sharing information. I was performing. My voice became stiff. My sentences became unnatural. I wasn't myself anymore. Afterward, I didn't even remember what I said. I just remembered how nervous I felt.
That's such a powerful observation. Let's imagine communication as a bridge between two people. When you're focused on communication, you're simply walking across that bridge, sharing ideas, connecting. But when you're performing, you stop in the middle of the bridge and start asking, how do I look while walking? Is this impressive enough?
And then you forget where you're going.
Exactly. Performance shifts your attention inward, toward yourself. Communication shifts it outward, toward the other person.
So the more I think about myself, the worse I communicate?
Yes, because communication is not about you. It's about connection.
That's such a shift. Instead of asking, do I sound good? I should ask, am I being clear?
Beautifully said.
Honestly, that feels lighter, less pressure.
Because you're no longer trying to impress, you're trying to express.
Okay, that's powerful, but there's still something else I've noticed. Sometimes I just avoid speaking altogether.
And that brings us to the final point. Speaking is not just a skill, it's a habit. And many learners simply haven't built that habit yet.
Yeah, that's a bit of a confession. I spent years learning English, watching videos, reading articles, listening to podcasts. But speaking? Almost never. I would tell myself, I'll start speaking when I'm ready. But that moment never came. And one day I realized I wasn't avoiding English. I was avoiding discomfort. Because speaking felt risky, unpredictable. So I stayed in the safe zone, understanding.
That's incredibly honest. Let's think of habits like paths in a forest. The more you walk a path, the clearer it becomes. Understanding English? That path is wide and comfortable. You've walked it many times. But speaking? That path is barely visible. Maybe just a few footprints.
So every time I avoid speaking, I'm not building the path.
Exactly. And every time you do speak, even imperfectly, you're clearing that path.
So it's not about speaking perfectly, it's about speaking consistently?
Yes, frequency over perfection.
That's a big shift, because I always thought I needed confidence first.
Confidence comes from repetition, not the other way around.
So the habit creates the confidence.
Exactly.
That's actually empowering.
Because it means you don't have to wait anymore. Let's slow things down and explore some of the expressions we use today. Not just their meaning, but their feeling.
Yeah, because these aren't just words. They carry emotion, context, even identity.
Paradoxical feels like a quiet contradiction. Two truths that don't seem to fit together.
In business, it's paradoxical that higher investment led to lower growth. In life, it's paradoxical. I understand everything, but I can't speak.
Hesitation carries a sense of pause, almost like a moment of doubt.
At work, there was hesitation before approving the deal. Personally, my hesitation stopped me from joining the conversation.
Perfectionism. It feels heavy, like a pressure to get everything exactly right.
Business. Perfectionism delayed the project launch. Life. My perfectionism keeps me from speaking freely.
Rewiring. This word feels transformative, like changing something deep inside.
Work. We're rewiring the company's strategy. Life. I'm rewiring my brain to think in English.
Performing has a sense of being watched, like you're on stage.
Business. He was performing instead of leading the discussion. Life. I wasn't communicating, I was performing.
Discomfort. It's subtle but powerful, a quiet resistance inside you.
Work. There's discomfort around the new policy. Life. I avoided speaking because of discomfort.
Consistency feels steady, calm, like showing up again and again.
Business. Consistency builds trust with clients. Life. Consistency in speaking builds confidence.
If there's one thing we hope you take from today, it's this. Your struggle with speaking is not a failure. It's a reflection of how you've been learning. You've been understanding deeply, but not living the language actively.
Yeah, and honestly, that changes everything. Because it means the solution isn't about being better, it's about being more conscious.
More aware of how you think, how you feel, how you react when you speak. Because language is not just something you do, it's something you experience.
And maybe that's the real shift. Instead of asking, how can I speak perfectly, we start asking, how can I show up more honestly when I speak?
Exactly. Because fluency is not about perfection, it's about presence. It's about allowing yourself to be seen, even when your words aren't perfect yet.
So here's a question for you. When was the last time you stayed silent? Not because you had nothing to say, but because you were afraid of how it would sound.
And what would change if you chose to speak anyway?
Sit with that. Reflect on it.
This is Mia.
And this is Leo. You've been listening to The English Couch, your cozy corner for real English conversations.
See you in our cozy corner next time.
Bye.